He may be the most abused man in America, but Dan Quayle tells Chris Wallace he's got a whole new image. You decide. Watch Primetime Thursday.
Let's talk again to Karen Burns, our correspondent in New Orleans, and to Hal Garish at the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables. Karen, in New Orleans, aside from evacuation completely by fleeing across that causeway, I understand there's another plan in the city. What is it?
Well, there are a number of suggestions, Sam, and one of the most interesting, I think, and it pretty well explains the predicament officials are in here, is that they vertically evacuate people. That is, that if people cannot get out in time on these highways, they'll take them downtown to the city's high-rise buildings and put them on the higher floors and just keep them there until the hurricane passes by. There's a real concern here that people aren't going to get out of here fast enough. There's only this highway behind me, I-10 West, and I-10 East, which goes into lower-lying areas. So if they don't get out in time, officials have had to think of some way around it, and that's going right up to the high floors of their highest buildings.
Well, Hal Garish at the National Hurricane Center, what do you think of the idea of evacuation vertically into the high floors of skyscrapers, or what amounts to skyscrapers in New Orleans?
I go along with anything the emergency managers recommend for their particular areas. And I know it varies a little bit from place to place. Here in South Florida, we use vertical evacuation as a last choice. I know the situation there in New Orleans, and you don't have any other choice other than to do that, it seems to me.
Well, are you telling us that the winds, if they approach 120, 130, 140 miles an hour, won't blow out the windows of those buildings?
Well, that's always a possibility, but how far can you move? I know it takes hours to move people from near the coast in that area. If you have that amount of time, fine. You know, that's great. It's better to move horizontal than it is vertical. But you can, as a last resort, I think that's what they're recommending in that area, and it probably is not a bad idea.
Karen, you told us earlier that, of course, New Orleans is, as maybe some people didn't know, is actually below sea level, and they're going to use sandbags to try to keep out the ocean. Now, that's to try to actually keep out the Gulf of Mexico, not just tides that are extra high because of the hurricane.
That's right, Sam. This is an area that really is a swamp. Some people have described New Orleans as a bowl, quite literally. And so what they've done is they've built levees around, trying to keep river, gulf, and swamp waters out. They've actually made a fortress around this city. The problem is that these gates they've built, they say, can only withstand or can only keep out 5 feet of water. And I know in Miami that the water was much, much higher than that. So these, I'm not sure how much this can really do in the long run.
Well, Hal, we've been reporting that in Miami earlier today, there was a wall of water some 12 feet high pushed ahead of the hurricane. Is that correct?
Well, talking with Dr. Sheets earlier this evening, he seems to feel like that report is reliable and that the water levels did reach in the vicinity of 12 feet down in the Homestead area.
Well, what is the danger in a hurricane? We know it's wind, but can it also be water in the sense that these tidal waves come through and do an enormous amount of damage?
Okay, now the storm surge associated with a hurricane is not like the tsunami that you have in the Pacific. It's a gradual rise in water with wave action on top of it, and just before or near eye landfall, water rises very rapidly. 9 out of 10 people that die in a hurricane drown in this so-called storm surge. That's the most critical thing in the flood zone, is a storm surge.
All right, thanks very much. Hal Garish at the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, and Karen Burns.
Sir, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.